What's up, Blackish fam? It's your boy B. We've been going over one of Malcolm X's legendary speeches. I'm not familiar with it. It's called The Ballot or the Bullet. But he's talking about discussing real change, right? He's talking about how so many protests and sitting in, how it's not working. But not only is it's just not effective. And he's saying for real change, we need to explore what's called Black nationalism. And it's a way that other areas of the world have become free, right, from their oppressor. And you think about that, and I know it's this harsh language to some, but we think about the state of some of our inner cities and the demise of the Black family and the Black community, and you think there's really a system out to destroy us, but we are part of that system that's destroying ourselves. Now, we need major change in our communities. So one thing we're doing here at Blackish University is we're looking at thought leaders of the past, whether it be Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., Marcus Garvey, and we're just exploring some of their previous work, as well as reacting to poems and spoken word and hip-hop. So, if you're a fan not just of good music that we explore on this channel, but thought leaders of yesteryear, and don't forget to like and subscribe. It's so important to bring education back into our communities, education that you're not getting from a regular university or at any school level.
Why does it look like it might be the year of the ballot or the bullet? Because Negroes have listened to the trickery and the lies and the false promises of the white man now for too long. And they're fed up. They've become disenchanted. They become disillusioned. They become dissatisfied. And all of this has built up frustrations in the Black community that makes the Black community throughout America today more explosive than all of the atomic bombs the Russians can ever invent.
So think about that, right? The power in numbers. If we were to unify, think about how explosive that is. Thinking about the overwhelming response when Barack Obama became the leader of the Democratic Party, right? Think about when he came into office and how we supported that movement. And it's something where we have to support other leaders, right? We have to support that. But just listen to what he's saying, man. This man is dropping knowledge.
Whenever you got a racial powder keg sitting in your lap, you're in more trouble than if you had an atomic powder keg sitting in your lap. When a racial powder keg goes off, it doesn't care who it knocks out the way. Understand this, it's dangerous. And in 1964, this seems to be the year.
And it wasn't the year, and now we're decades later, and we still have the same fight. Almost the exact same fight. And conditions are much different because now they discriminate behind closed doors. Right? Now they're racist in their own homes and they put on a friendly face. So you got to really think, and I know there's a fine line between radicalization, right, and understanding a positive movement. And, it's up for you to decide, but it's so important that we revisit these messages from the past that are still relevant today. You have to think, why did they want to silence Malcolm X?
Because what can the white man use now to fool us? After he put down that march on Washington, and you see all through that now, he tricked you, had you marching down to Washington. Yes, had you marching back and forth between the feet of a dead man named Lincoln and another dead man named George Washington, singing "We Shall Overcome."
And come on, you can't bash his movement because even though Martin Luther King Jr. preached nonviolence, there was still a lot of change, and one would argue he's just still widely respected, and that change has led the civil rights movement for decades, right? And we still remember his words, so there was a lot of change that came from Martin Luther King Jr., and I think that's something that Malcolm X needs to, he's very extreme in his views, that he has some really intellectual points and positions that he takes. But I think we have to watch the extreme views because it doesn't do any good to continue to segregate ourselves from the outside world. Yeah, there's some immediate change that makes sense, but you also you sound like and it's just we gotta be careful. We walk a fine line between creating programs that have more discriminatory practices or reverse racism, right, or another form of racism and discriminatory behavior towards another set of people. Because I do understand that we are not the minority. In fact, brownish, blackish people are the majority in the world, right? And we can use that power if we unify, but that doesn't mean that we should oppress or have negative. We shouldn't treat others as we were treated just because we can. We when you know better, do better,
right? He made a chump out of it. He made a fool out of it. He made you think you were going somewhere, and you end up going nowhere but between Lincoln and Washington. So today our people are disillusioned. They've become disenchanted. They've become dissatisfied. And in their frustrations they want action. So you see this young black man, this new generation, asking for the book ballot or the book. That old Uncle Tom action is outdated. The young generation don't want to hear anything about the odds are against us. What do we care about odds?
Odds have been against us our entire life. Some of the shit we've been through.
When this country here was first being founded, there were 13 colonies. The whites were colonized. They were fed up with this taxation without representation. So some of them stood up and said, liberty or death. So I went to a white school over here in Mason, Michigan. The white man made the mistake of letting me read his history book. He made the mistake of teaching me that Patrick Henry was a patriot. And George Washington wasn't nothing non-violent about old Pat or George Washington. Liberty or death was what brought about the freedom of whites in this country from the English.
Understand the real history.
They didn't care about the arts, but they faced the wrath of the entire British Empire. And in those days, they used to say that the British Empire was so vast and so powerful, and the sun would never set on it. This is how big it was. Yet these 13 little scrawny states, tired of taxation without representation, tired of being exploited and oppressed and degraded, told that big British Empire, liberty or death. And here you have 22 million Afro-American black people today catching more hell than Patrick Henry himself.
And think about that, right? And think about the positioning of that message, right? We're taught that in school that this series of events happened, and we should be proud of this and by these settlers in this new nation. But when we were taken, legit taken, and brought to this country, treated extremely poorly, right? And now, even after we passed a series of laws, we're still getting discriminated on, and we still have a hell of a lot of problems in this world. And it's like we're repeating the same cycle of violence, right? Like when you have an abusive father, one would argue the founding fathers, and they, as much as they want to see change and they hate their dad for what he did, they end up becoming just like him. And think about that. Let that resonate, and think about how the country has done that, right? What was this country? What did our founding fathers think about this country when they got here, and what were they running from? And is there a very similar movement happening right now? And if so, where could we run to? Right? Nowhere. But we want change, and there's millions of more people than there were with just those little, what he called scrawny colonies. Right? Now think about the change that we can make with a real movement.
I'm here to tell you, in case you don't know, that you got a new generation of black people in in this country who don't care anything whatsoever about ours. They don't want to hear you old Uncle Tom handkerchief head talking about the honor. This is a new generation. If they're going to draft these young black men and send them over to Korea or South Vietnam to face 800 million Chinese.
Think about that, right? Man, our world is so backwards.
If you're not afraid of those odds, you shouldn't be afraid of these odds. Why does this loom to be such an explosive political year? Because this is the year of politics. This is the year when all of the white politicians are going to come into the Negro community. You've never seen them until election time. You can't blame them until election time.
And it's about to happen now, right? In 2024, when we have an election for president, a U.S. election, you're going to start seeing the ads on black TV stations, right? You're going to start seeing names that you don't know, and then so-called community leaders trying to get you to side with someone. Take a step back and look at what that person represents. And if we want real change, we got to stop this. We got to vote. We got to be active.
They're going to come in with false promises. And as they make these false promises, they're going to feed our frustrations. And this will only serve to make matters worse. I'm no politician. I'm not even a student of politics. I'm not a Republican, nor a Democrat, nor an American. And got sense enough to know.
Woo! Listen to what he's saying, and I love what he says there. No, I don't consider myself a Republican or a Democrat, right? This is an intelligent, common sense party, right? We want to know the facts, and we want to make intelligent decisions based on all of the facts together, right? For good or for worse, that we want to know what's going on in our world around us and how we can change the odds for future generations. That's it. Is it that hard?
I'm one of the 22 million black victims of the Democrats. One of the 22 million black victims of the Republicans, and one of the 22 million black victims of Americanism.
Think about that.
And when I speak, I don't speak as a Democrat or a Republican. I speak as a victim of America's so-called democracy. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy.
Listen to those words, right?
When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who has been the victim of Americanism. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare.
You think about that, right? And they say people come to the United States to experience the American dream, right? People come here and they fight, sometimes their whole life to set themselves up and build wealth for the next generation and keep that going. And you think about that, and you think about the things that are the way that we see the world, right? We're fearful of law enforcement. We have to be fearful of, in these days, somebody riding around in a pickup truck with too many American flags on it might be somewhat of a call saying, yo, I'm low-key racist. It's like you have to be wary of all these things. You have to move with caution. Right? What do they say? Walk on eggshells, sleep on a bed of nails, right? You have to move with caution throughout this world that we can't trust. And even when it comes to something as simple as crime or defending yourselves, we're still the victim of this country, right? And this country has not worked out well for us. We were taken and we were placed here, and we're doing the best that we can. Yeah, some areas are struggling, but we need real change to make the entire country better. And it's meant so much of what Malcolm X is saying. He can be a little extreme at times, but it's so relevant today. And is there anybody still listening to the message?
We haven't benefited from America's democracy. We've only suffered from America's hypocrisy. And the generation that's coming up now can see it. And I'm not afraid to say it.
Yeah.
If you go to jail, so what? If you're black, you were born in jail.
It's a different form of jail. Some people know they're in it, some people don't.
If you're black, you were born in jail. In the North as well as the South. Stop talking about the South. As long as you're south of the Canadian border, you're South.
Except you're anywhere in the U.S. here in the South, right? We're all in this together. Stop thinking you're different and we're in a better
Don't
position.
call Governor Wallace a Dixie governor. Romney is a Dixie governor. 22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature.
And that's
And
still
as they
happening.
develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections.
You know, one would argue that this was the motion behind the Bernie Sanders campaign. Yes, it wasn't just racism, but it was about major social change. And yeah, a lot of what Bernie Sanders pushes might not be realistic with the economy and the U.S. the way it is now, but at least he has a vision that he's fighting for. I can't say that about a lot of politicians that are looking at breaking some of the systems that we have in place. I think that's necessary for real change.
They see that the whites are so evenly divided that every time they vote, the race is so close, they have to go back and count the votes all over again. And which means that any block, any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You can keep Johnson in Washington, D.C., or you can send him back to his Texas cotton patch.
You think about the power in numbers, right?
You're the one who sent Kennedy to Washington. You're the one who put the present Democratic administration in Washington, D.C. The whites were evenly divided. It was the fact that you threw 80% of your votes behind the Democrats that put the Democrats in the White House.
Yeah, think about that, right? And, you know, not a shot to Joe Biden, but, man, I think Joe Biden is a little bit of a fuck-up, right? And it's okay to say that. It's like people think if you say that you're automatically a Trump supporter. And, man, Trump was an asshole, right? But there's still some policies that make sense as a nation. Just like with Joe Biden, there's going to be some things that I take from that. We need to stop being so divided about Republican and Democrat and know that it's never really been that. And I don't even think it's black or white anymore. It's the haves and the have-nots. And the people that have the system of power in place over the majority. You know, we are not the minority.
When you see this, you can see that the Negro vote is the key factor. And despite the fact that you are in a position to be the determining factor, what do you get out of it? The Democrats have been in Washington, D.C. only because of the Negro vote. They've been down there 4 years. And all other legislation they wanted to bring up, they brought it up and gotten it out of the way, and now they bring up you. And now they bring up you. You put them first, and they put you last. Because you're a chump.
I don't agree with that, but I don't think you give anybody our vote just off top, just because you're the leader of a party that supposedly has my best interests in mind. I wouldn't say I'm a Republican either because, man, some of these guys are batshit crazy. But there needs to be a common sense, independent party that can unite and unify the voice, right? And we'll have some real political power.
A political chump. In Washington, D.C., in the House of Representatives, there are 257 who are Democrats. Only 177 are Republicans. In the Senate, there are 67 Democrats. Only 33 are Republicans. The party that you backed controls 2/3 of the House of Representatives and the Senate, and still they can't keep their promise to you because you're a chump.
Yo, who are you believing, right? Are the Democrats, are they moving with our best interest in mind? Or have they been in positions of power to make change and haven't initiated the change? I've been old enough. These white hairs tell a story, and I know there's three sides to every argument, right? Your side, their side, and the truth. And I'm just so over Republicans and Democrats and everything being split and people not making common sense decisions because they have they have to stay with their party. It's just such bullshit. And it's like, if you're not as much of a man to say, yo, I'm a Republican, but this shit is batshit crazy. I don't vibe with that. I don't get down like that. Democrats too. Right? It's like, if you're just so much of a wuss, if you can't take a step back from your party and say, yo, this is for the greater good of our country, and make a decision based off intellect instead of what the chorus tells you of an ad they put on a black radio station. And you're like, oh, that sounds good. I'm going to vote for him. Like, what? Are you...
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Wow. That's saying a lot. He's definitely got some strong viewpoints. But yo, let's be real. If we keep doing the same thing and expecting change, how's that going to work
and
out?
what kind of alibi do they come up with? They try and pass the buck to the Dixiecrats. Now, back during the days when you were blind, deaf, and dumb, ignorant, politically immature, naturally you went along with that. But today, as your eyes come open and you develop political maturity, you're able to see and think for yourself. And you can see that a Dixiecrat is nothing but a Democrat in disguise.
Yo, he's speaking facts right here, right? There's so many of us that are against each other. Why? Because we live on the other side of the fence, right? Because our skin's a little bit lighter or a little bit darker, or because one's a GD and one's a Vice Lord and one's a Blackstone. Like, yo, think about the power that we would have if we unify and become one nation. Not just power, physical power, but the power of the pen. Right? Think about the change that we can bring in the voice that you can't deny when you're in a position of power. And that we've never had power like that because we can't unify. And if something like this doesn't unify, then you're probably part of the problem, right?
You look at the structure of the government that controls this country. It's controlled by 16 senatorial committees and 20 congressional committees.
You know what's even worse? If you look at the companies at the very top of the food chain that are invested in other large corporate companies, you'll find that most of the power in this world goes up to just a table of individuals that own these, that are multi-billionaires, or at the worst case, multi-millionaires, that have built this incredible wealth where they can influence decision makings in entire industries because they own the rights to, let's say, Pepsi and Coca-Cola, right? And they're kind of behind the scenes, right? These companies that own major interests in these companies, you think you really have a choice between Pepsi and Coke? There's a market for both, and when they're together, unified, they're getting the majority of the market share. And there's knowledge, and there's this whole system in place for that. Some of the generics that you buy are made in the same factories with the awesome laundry detergent and the crap laundry detergent. Some are a little bit watered down, but it's the same mixture. You got to think about stuff like that. Like, you're being deceived constantly throughout your day. And once you can open your eyes and see that, you realize the true power. Like, yo, who told me the world was like this? Right? Who said I had to be a slave 9 to 5, 5 days a week, And I just told you in my last video how you can make $4,000 to $5,000 a month easily from home, and you don't need anybody to hire you. That's just one of several things that you can do. You can middleman all sorts of negotiations and labor things where you're not just going out there to work at KFC or Taco Bell. Should be an intro job for someone. There's so much that we can do in our own communities, from building up properties and purchasing properties and cleaning fields and planting and fixing the pavement and creating companies that can bid out on work. And we need leaders in our community, not just guys that can help guide the youth, but we also need to put people in place that can help guide change, right, and bring education into the communities. That's why this channel is called Blackish University, because it's not just about telling people what they're doing different. It's about giving them the information that they need to make a decision, an intelligent decision on their own. And I'm hoping that comes across as that. I don't agree with all of Malcolm X's point of views, but I think it's really important that we understand the vision of these thought leaders of yesteryear, because we're in the same fight. What we're doing isn't working.
Of the 16 senatorial committees that run the government, 10 of them are in the hands of Southern segregationists. Of the 20 congressional committees that run the government, 12 of them are in the hands of Southern segregationists. And they're going to tell you and me that the South lost the war.
Think about that, right? It's not the same structure now. Think about what the message, what they're telling you.
You today are in the hands of a government of segregationists, racists, white supremacists, who belong to the Democratic Party but disguise themselves as Dixiecrats. Dixiecrat is nothing but a Democrat. Whoever runs the Democrats is also the father of the Dixiecrats. And the father of all of them is sitting in the White House.
Yo, that is true. It's like, there's haves and have-nots. And, you ever see that thing? I know it was really popular on social media a year or two ago. And they said that when you put black ants and red ants in a jar, they live in harmony, right? And they work together. But when you shake that jar, the black ants think the red ants are attacking, and the red ants think the black ants are attacking, and they're just effing everything up. And then the question goes, well, who's shaking the jar, right? Who's incentivized by having chaos here and keeping these people in this bubble? And you think about that, and you think about people putting us against each other, different areas of the city, different states, is there really a difference between a poor Republican and a poor Democrat? Or somebody who's, I hate when these people think they're all high and mighty because they're a blue collar worker. And it's like, the industry is changing, right? They're not even going to have freight truck jobs, CDL licensed drivers that are making $80,000 a year anymore. There's companies that are heavily investing in self-driving vehicles. It's happening. And you see people saying, well, they're always going to need somebody behind the wheel. No. And it's not that. It's think of like the self-checkout registers. Yes, there's still somebody technically behind the register, but they're able to get a much lower paid individual, and they're able to oversee a lot more of the operation. So instead of 5 or 6 different cashiers, you could have one person overseeing 5 lanes, right? And then you could also have a lower quality person doing that job because it's kind of remedial work. And you think about how that change is going to affect the trucking industry. You can put a $10, $15 an hour minimum wage guy, and he can handle the job. The truck does the rest. And if you don't think it's possible, you're sadly mistaken. You know that airplanes can pretty much fly themselves and land themselves. They need a quality person there because of the risk involved. And people are like, oh, there's hacking and there's ways around everything. There's so much technology that's coming out. We might get to a point where we need some level of basic world minimal income because robots are going to do so many of our jobs. They're just better capable to do it. And it's easier to manage and maintain a robot force than it is a human force. So we're going to be needed in other ways. But it's important to work smarter, not harder.
I say it again. You got a president who's nothing but a southern segregationist. From the state of Texas. They'll lynch you in Texas as quick as they'll lynch you in Mississippi. Only in Texas, they lynch you with a Texas accent. In Mississippi, they lynch you with a Mississippi accent.
Yo, let's be real.
And the first thing the cracker does when he comes in power, he takes all the Negro leaders and invites them for a coffee.
Ooh, didn't we see that when Donald Trump was Kanye West and Kim Kardashian? He's trying to get the social leaders, right, the influencers of the time. You always see that. They have to maintain. And, you know, what happens when you get in a position of power? You need to see who's on your side, right? Who's fighting the fight with you and who's fighting the fight until something better comes across, or who's working for the other party.
To show that he's all right. And those Uncle Toms can't pass up the call.
No, they can't. It's true.
They come away from the coffee table telling you and me that this man is all right.
Yeah, this man's all right. He's going to push change. He's one of us. And it's like, man, I love to see people of color making moves and shaking up the world. But so often do we find that they're being influenced by the powers that be as well. And it's so often that they become, you know, exploited. And it's like we need real change, and we need multiple people in positions of power, and we need to do this in the right way, in the right fashion, because you don't get a second chance at revolution.
Because he's from the South, and since he's from the South, he can deal with the South. And look at the logic that they use. What about Eastland? He's from the South. Make him the president. If Johnson is a good man because he's from Texas, and being from Texas will enable, if Johnson is a good man because he's from Texas, and being from Texas will enable him to deal with the South, Eastland can deal with the South better than Johnson. Oh, I say, you've been misled. You've been had. You've been took.
And you don't even know it. Half the time, you're just working every day. You are going about life not realizing that you're part of the problem.
I was in Washington a couple of weeks ago while the senators were filibustering. And I noticed in the back of the Senate a huge map. And on this map, it showed the distribution of Negroes in America. And surprisingly, the same senators that were involved in the filibuster were from the states where there were the most Negroes. Why were they filibustering the civil rights legislation? Because the civil rights legislation is supposed to guarantee voting rights to Negroes in those states. And those senators from those states know that if the Negroes in those states can vote, those senators are down the drain.
Think about it.
The representatives of those states go down the drain. And in the Constitution of this country, it has a stipulation wherein whenever the voting rights of people in a certain district are violated, then the representative who's from that particular district, according to the Constitution, is supposed to be expelled from the Congress. Now, if this particular aspect of the Constitution was enforced, why, you wouldn't have a cracker in Washington, D.C.
Fiery, right?
But what will happen when you expel the Dixiecrat, you're expelling the Democrat. When you destroy the power of the Dixiecrat, you're destroying the power of the Democratic Party. So how in the world can the Democratic Party in the South actually side with you in sincerity when all of its power is based in the South? These Northern Democrats are in cahoots with the Southern Democrats.
Just putting you on knowledge. It's a little different now, but
con game. A political con game. You know how it goes. One of them comes to you and makes them for you. And he's in cahoots with the other one that's not for you. Why? Because neither one of them is for you. But they got to make you go with one of them or the other. So this is a con game. And this is what they've been doing with you and me all these years. First thing Johnson got off the plane when he became president. He asked, where's Dickie? You know who Dickie is? Dickie is old Southern cracker Richard Russell. Yeah, yes. Lyndon B. Johnson's best friend is the one who is ahead, who's heading the forces that are filibustering civil rights legislation. You tell me how in the hell is he going to be Johnson's best friend?
This is all history, right? And this is history that's not in, you're not going to read about this in 6th grade or 8th grade. People say, well, why aren't there, what happened to the civil rights movement? Why isn't there change in this day and age in America? Well, this is why, and this is information that became public, but there's a lot more information that's public now. But we're so distracted, we don't even look at it. Think about the Childish Gambino song, This Is America, right? Think about the music video, right? What he does, for those that don't know, is in the back, there's so much distraction that you don't see what's really going on right in front of you. He's dancing and doing all these moves, and behind there's people killing themselves, there's civil unrest, and that's unfortunately what's going on in our country today. You don't know about Nelson Mandela or Marcus Garvey or Malcolm X, but you know everything Kim Kardashian did with Pete Davidson over the weekend, and who stayed at whose house and what movie they watched. Think about that.
How can Johnson be his friend and your friend too? No, that man is too tricky. Especially good friends and still old Dickie.
Republicans voted in favor of the Civil Rights Act.
Whenever the Negroes keep the Democrats in power, they're keeping the Dixocrats in power. This is true. A vote for a Democrat is nothing but a vote for a Dixocrat. I know you don't like me saying that.
And that's still today, I couldn't say that, right? I don't agree with Republicans or Democrats. But my concern would be that if so many people are not voting for the Democratic Party, you're making a Republican candidate stronger. So you can't have real change unless you support a new party.
I'm not the kind of person who come here to say what you like. I'm going to tell you the truth whether you like it or not.
That's what I say about this channel, right? Blackish University, modern day griots. And everybody's, what's a griot, right? A griot is someone that passes down tradition or ways to move in this world from generation to generation without the use of textbooks, the internet, right? They pass down through music, through storytelling, through videos. I want this to be modern day griots. And griots were known for the good, the bad, and the ugly. They didn't sugarcoat where you were or where you came from. This was the truth about who you are. And we're missing that. We're missing that today, right? You don't know who you are or why you're here. A lot of people think that their history begins as a slave. No, you were so much more than a slave at one point, right? They didn't just take you from a land that was wild hyenas and people walking around with feathers in their ears and big lip rings, right? There were places like Timbuktu that had some of the greatest universities and libraries, and people from all over the nation came here for intelligence, right? This was an intelligent civilization that we were taken from and thrown into America. So don't ever think that you're just some slave worker, some hired help, some, a muscle. No, you're so much more. We're also intellectual thinkers, right? Thought leaders. And we need to get back to that and thinking of ourselves as that.
Up here in the North, you have the same thing. The Democratic Party don't do it. They don't do it this way. They got a thing that they call gerrymandering. They maneuver you out of power. Even though you can vote, they fix it so you're voting for nobody. They got you going and coming. In the South, they're outright political wolves. In the North, they're political foxes. A fox and a wolf are both canine. Both belong to the dog family.
Think about that, right? Are you a wolf or are you a wolf in sheep's clothing? And, you got to think about that. And when you do your history on the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, you might be surprised at the information that you find. Again, I'm sorry if this is all new to you, but this is a very bad world that we live in. And the world is being managed by a group of people at the top. And the unfortunate thing is a lot of people don't realize that they've been manipulated. And how wonderful the world can be if we all moved for social change. But there's a few people at the top of the ladder that honestly pull the strings for everyone else. And most people are trained to get by just enough that they don't ruffle the feathers. They don't speak when they're not spoken to. And it's unfortunate. We still have gerrymandering problems today. Think about that.
You take your choice. You're going to choose a northern dog or a southern dog. Because either dog you choose, I guarantee you'll still be in the doghouse. This is why I say it's the ballot or the bullet. It's liberty or death. It's freedom for everybody or freedom for nobody.
No. That's what he's saying, right? Everyone deserves freedom.
America today finds herself in a unique situation. Historically, revolutions are bloody. Oh, yes, they are.
Don't let them tell you otherwise.
Revolution. Or a non-violent revolution. That don't happen even in Hollywood.
Think about that.
You don't have a revolution in which you love your enemy. And you don't have a revolution in which you are begging the system of exploitation to integrate you into it. Revolutions overturn systems. Revolutions destroy systems. A revolution is bloody. But America is in a unique position. She's the only country in history in a position actually to become involved in a bloodless revolution. The Russian Revolution was bloody. Chinese Revolution was bloody. French Revolution was bloody. Cuban Revolution was bloody. And there was nothing more bloody than the American Revolution. But today, this country can become involved in a revolution that won't take bloodshed. All she's got to do is give the black man in this country everything he's doing. Everything.
Think about that, right? The numbers support, do your research and see who the real minority is in this country, right? It's not the powers that be, right, that are getting all this wealth. It's the powers in the numbers, right? We can completely destroy the system and create a new system, and we see people doing it, right, with Bitcoin and destroying, tearing down, but also creating an alternative option, and that's what we need. And we need a lot of that in our own communities, right? It's not just destroying the community, but putting systems in place to help better the people that are there. And we're missing that.
I hope that the white man can see this. Because if you don't see it, you're finished. If you don't see it, you're going to become involved in some action in which you don't have a chance. And we don't care anything about your atomic bomb. It's useless. Because other countries have atomic bombs. When 2 or 3 different countries have atomic bombs, nobody can use it. So it means that the white man today is without a weapon. If you want some action, you got to come on down to earth. And there's more black people on earth than there are white people.
That's what I was saying, right? If you do real research, you'll understand that we are not the minority. There's more brown and blackish people in the entire world, where it's in the best interest of, white America to maintain political power. Because if they don't, and there was unification in the world, it could be a very ugly place if you're a minority. We don't want that for anyone, right? But you have to stop and think. We need unification. We need one leader. We need one movement, or we're all over the place, like Chicago is now, right? Chicago inner cities. And Chicago is a beautiful place to be. Some of the best houses are on the west and south side of Chicago. But the areas have been destroyed by this cycle. And the unfortunate thing is too many people are part of that cycle and they don't understand why they're in it or how they're in it. But they were born into it. And we need immediate change to break that cycle. And we need someone that can do it.
I only got a couple more minutes. The white man can never win another war on the ground. His days of war victory, his days of background victory, oh. Can I prove it? Yes. Take all the action that's going on this earth right now. Where he's involved in. Tell me where he's winning. Nowhere. Where some race farmers, some race eaters ran him out of Korea. Yes, they ran him out of Korea.
When you think about that, you look at what we're doing in Iraq, right, and other areas around the world, and it's like, we got some big problems. We need to unify, or we can be in a very bad place. It's not just about numbers anymore. It's about intelligence, too.
With nothing but gym shoes and a rifle and a bowl of rice. Took him and his tanks and his napalm and all that other action he's supposed to have and ran him across the Yalu. Why? Because the day that he can run on the ground is past. Up in French Indochina, those little peasants, race growers, took on the might of the French army and ran all the Frenchmen. You remember Din Ben Phu?
I remember, but who else has that information, right? So much of this, when we start exploring those deeper channels, right? Channels like this on YouTube, hopefully we can put together something from our history where you're just unfortunately not taught. This isn't part of the curriculum in high school, not because it's not common knowledge, but it's not in the best interest of the country if everyone had this knowledge. If there was a true movement to unite people around the world, it would be very bad for the people that are now controlling the top of the world, right?
The same thing happened in Algeria, in Africa. They didn't have anything but a rifle. The French had all these highly mechanized instruments of warfare. But they put some guerrilla action on. And a white man can't fight a guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla action takes heart, takes nerve, and he doesn't have that.
I wouldn't go that far because there's some technology that
He's brave when he's got tanks. He's brave when he's got planes. He's brave when he's got bombs. He's brave when he got a whole lot of company along with him. But you take that little man from Africa and Asia, turn him loose in the woods with a blade.
You Rambo that ass.
That's all he needs. All he needs is a blade. And when the sun comes down, goes down, and it's dark, it's even Steven.
For sure. Yeah. Well, it's dark. Who's got control of a lot of these areas, right?
So it's the ballot.
You think about that with areas like Chicago, and it's like, who's really in control when you think about the numbers? You know how small an area it is? The good area of Chicago is what? From the lakefront, and it goes all the way to Narragansett or Harlem on the north side. You can drive across that within the hour, right? And what's the good area? One would argue if you go too far north in Chicago, it's not a good area. Definitely after Howard or so, depending on the cross street. But from Howard to what? Lake Street, when it starts to be the south side, you can go all across Chicago and Logan Square, Wicker Park, the new, what do they call it, Humboldt Heights. They used to be Humboldt Park. All these areas are in one, there's only one safe area of Chicago. Everything else is all around it. Imagine if all around it were to unify. It's like we can make either the world a better place or our city a better place, or we could just bring everything down and equally shitty.
Or a bullet. Today our people can see that we're faced with a government conspiracy. This government has failed us. The senators who are filibustering concerning your and my rights, that's the government. Don't say it's Southern senators, this is the government. This is a government filibuster. It's not a segregationist filibuster. It's a government filibuster. Any kind of activity that takes place on the floor of the Congress or the Senate, that's the government. Any kind of dilly-dallying, that's the government. Any kind of pussyfooting, that's the government. Any kind of act that designs to delay or deprive you and me right now of getting full rights, that's the government, that's responsible.
Yeah, when you hear of, I mean, there's legitimately places that are trying to make it harder for people of color to vote right now. And where's the uproar, right? It's like people are trying to take away your right to vote. And we're not doing anything about that? Like, you don't think that's a big issue? Like, you can tell that when people get worried and they're trying to take away your right to vote because they know the true power is in the pen. That's how you get change. By doing these things like gerrymandering, if you're not familiar with it, Google it. Use your phone for a little something more than Fortnite or Call of Duty. Do yourself some research and Google gerrymandering, Jerry with a G.
And anytime you find the government involved in a conspiracy to violate the citizenship or the civil rights of a people, then you are wasting your time going to that government expecting redress. Instead, you have to take that government to the world court and accuse it of genocide and all of the other crimes that it is guilty of today.
You said a lot there.
So those of us whose political and economic and social philosophy is black nationalism have become involved in the civil rights struggle. We have injected ourselves into the civil rights struggle, and we intend to expand it from the level of civil rights to the level of human rights. As long as you fight it on the level of civil rights, you're under Uncle Sam's jurisdiction. You're going to his court expecting him to correct the problem. He created the problem. He's the criminal. You don't take your case to the criminal, you take your criminal to court.
This is a dangerous man. Was a dangerous man.
When the government of South Africa began to trample upon the human rights of the people of South Africa, they were taken to the UN. When the government of Portugal began to trample upon the rights of our brothers and sisters in Angola, it was taken before the UN. Well, even the white man took the Hungarian question to the UN, and just this week, Chief Justice Goldberg was crying over 3 million Jews in Russia about their human rights, charging Russia with violating the UN Charter because of its mistreatment of the human rights of Jews in Russia. Now you tell me, how can the plight of everybody on this earth reach the halls of the United Nations when you have 22 million Afro-Americans whose churches are being bombed, whose little girls are being murdered, whose leaders are being shot down in broad daylight? Now you tell me why the leaders of this struggle have never taken it before the United Nations.
This is a dangerous man. And now you see, you have to ask yourself, why did they want him out of the picture? Listen to what he's bringing to the table.
Next move is to take the entire civil rights struggle into the United Nations.
To the World Court.
Let the world see that Uncle Sam is guilty of violating the human rights of 22 million Afro-Americans, and still has the audacity or the nerve to stand up and represent himself as the leader of the free world. Not only is he a crook, he's a hypocrite. Here he is standing up in front of other people, Uncle Sam, with the blood of young men, mothers and fathers on his hands. with the blood dripping
Think
down
about
his
that,
jaws
right?
like a bloody jawed wolf. And still got the nerve to point his finger at other countries. You can't even get civil rights legislation. And this man has got the nerve to stand up and talk about South Africa, or talk about Nazi Germany, or talk about Portugal. Why, no more days like those.
Yo, talking about getting somebody hyped up, right?
So I say in my conclusion, the only way we're going to solve it, we got to unite in unity and harmony. And black nationalism is the key. How are we going to overcome the tendency to be at each other's throat that always exists in our neighborhood? And the reason this tendency exists, the strategy of the white man has always been divide and conquer. He keeps us divided in order to conquer us. He tells you I'm for separation and you for integration and keep us fighting with each other. No, I'm not for separation and we're not for integration. What you and I are for is freedom.
Common goal, define that goal, and then define how to move towards that.
Only you think that integration will get you freedom. I think separation will get me freedom. We both got the same objective. We just got different ways of getting at it. So I studied this man, Billy Graham, who preaches white nationalism. That's what he preaches. I say that's what he preaches. The whole church structure in this country is white nationalism. You go inside a white church, that's what they preach, white nationalism. You got Jesus white, Mary white, God white, everybody white, that's white nationalism. So what he does, the way he circumvents the jealousy and envy that he ordinarily would incur among the heads of the church. Whenever you go into an area where the church already is, you're going to run into trouble. Because they got that thing, what you call it, syndicated. So they got a syndicate, just like the record is have. I'm going to say what's on my mind, but the church has already, the preachers already proved to you that they got a syndicate.
Oh, he's dropping. That's why they killed this man. I get it.
When you're out in the rackets, whenever you get in another man's territory, you know, they gang up on you. And that's the same way with you. You run into the same thing. So how Billy Graham gets around that, instead of going into somebody else's territory, like he's going to start a new church, he doesn't start a church. He just goes in preaching Christ. And he says, everybody who believes in him, you go wherever you find him. So this helps all the churches, and so since it helps all the churches, they don't find him. Well, we're going to do the same thing, only our gospel is black nationalism. His gospel is white nationalism, our gospel is black nationalism. And the gospel of black nationalism, as I told you, means you should control the politics of your community, the economy of your community, and all of the society in which you live should be under your control. And once you feel that this philosophy will solve your problem, go join any church where it's preached. Don't join a church where white nationalism is preached. Now you can go to a Negro church and be exposed to white nationalism. When you walk in Negro churches and a white Mary and some white angels, that Negro church is preaching white nationalism.
Gotta love his approach to the world and how he brings comedy into it as well.
When you go to a church and you see the pastor of that church with a philosophy and a program that's designed to bring black people together and elevate black people, join that church. Join that church. If you see where the NAACP is preaching and practicing that which is designed to make black nationalism materialize, join NAACP. Join any kind of organization, civic, religious, fraternal, political, or otherwise, but based on lifting the black man up and making him master of his own community.
Hey, and this choice, don't forget to like and subscribe, right? Blackish University, modern day griots. We're trying to fight that good fight and keep the legacy alive and integrate education with music and hip hop and poetry and politics and just have a bigger community where we can have a common message. And if you're a fan of doing better as a community, don't forget to like and subscribe for cool stuff like this. But just to join a sense of community. Let's get it together, guys.
It'll be the ballot it'll be the bullet. It'll be liberty or it'll be death.
Just like the
And if
founding
you're not ready to
fathers.
pay that price, don't use the word freedom in your vocabulary. One more thing. I was on a program in Illinois recently with Senator Paul Douglas, the so-called liberal, so-called Democrat, so-called white man. At which time he told me that our African brothers were not interested in us in Africa. He said, the Africans aren't interested in the American Negro. I knew it was mine. But during the next 2 or 3 weeks, it's my intention and plan to make a tour of our African homeland. And I hope that when I come back, I'll be able to come back and let you know how our African brothers and sisters feel toward us.
All right, there, Malcolm.
And I know before I go there, but they love us. We're one. We're the same. The same man who has colonized them all these years, colonized you and me too, all these years. And all we have to do now is wake up and work in unity and harmony, and the battle will be over. I want to thank the Freedom Now Party and the Goal. I want to thank Milton and Richard Henry for inviting me here this afternoon, and also Reverend Clay. And I want them to know that anything that I can ever do at any time to work with anybody in any kind of program that is sincerely designed to eliminate the political, the economic, and the social evils that confront all of our people in Detroit and elsewhere, all they got to do is give me a telephone call and I'll be on the next jet right on into the city.
Yo, let's talk about it, right? So how do you feel? I got to say, it's my first time listening to Malcolm X. Shiny, right? My first time really listening, not just to his words, but definitely this speech. There's a lot of what he says that's truth, right? These are facts. How does it make you feel? Do you feel a certain type of way about Republicans, Democrats? How do you feel about the political system? Like, do you think that it represents us now? Do we need a new party? What are ways to unite us? How could we be united? Is it through organizations? Now we have social media and tools like this channel. But what is it that we're doing to unite and fight that good fight as a unified body? Any suggestions, any comments, anything at all, feel free to leave in the comments. Let's get the conversation going.